Good afternoon. We have a absolute packed house here at St. Mary's University. That's all right. Plenty of good conversation going on. My name is Matt Ewalt. I serve the Texas Tribune as Senior Director of Events and Live Journalism. Welcome to those joining us in person here at St. Mary's University in San Antonio, and those joining us online for our program today titled San Antonio and the 2025 Legislative Session, with Representative Ray Lopez and Senator Jose Menendez, in conversation with Texas Tribune Editor-in-Chief Matthew Watkins. Our program today will run an hour with 45 minutes of conversation followed by your questions. Our in-person and online audience can submit questions through our Q&A portal at texastribune.org/ask. texastribune.org/ask. For those in person, we have some signage at the back of the room with a QR code that you can scan. Or if you're old school and just want to write your question down on a note card, you flag me down and I'll bring you one along with a pen. For those joining us online, you'll see that URL at the bottom of the screen throughout the program. We welcome your questions today. We are grateful for the support of our sponsors. Our major sponsors for today's program are CPS Energy, Methodist Healthcare Ministries, and Raise Your Hand Texas. Please note that while sponsorship provides critical support for the Tribune, sponsors play no role in programming or the line of questioning for Tribune events. We also want to thank our host, St. Mary's University, for hosting us for today's conversation. Here to offer a welcome on behalf of the university is the President, Winston Aravelis.
Good afternoon. Welcome to St. Mary's University. I have the joy and privilege of serving this wonderful institution as its 14th president. This is an important conversation, so I'm really glad to see everybody here this afternoon. And I'm grateful that the Tribune's taking this on as a forum for us to get into some dialogue. As you know, St. Mary's is the oldest institution of higher education in San Antonio. We're the oldest Catholic university in the Southwest, and we are home to the only law school between San Antonio and the border. And we have the dean of that law school with us this afternoon, Dean Roberts. We have a number of current and former members of the St. Mary's community in the audience, so if any of you have questions about St. Mary's, feel free to flag any of us down. As I was walking over, I was thinking about St. Mary's and the Mariners who came here 173 years ago to found this institution. And since our inception, St. Mary's University has been a place where we have brought the community together in dialogue. So I'm really grateful that all of you are here. Today's event focuses on the laws passed during the 2025 Texas legislative session, and we're going to spend some time looking at their impact on our neighbors across San Antonio. And it is such a privilege to welcome two elected officials who represent Bexar County districts that include St. Mary's University. So it's just such a privilege to welcome the Honorable Ray Lopez, Texas House Representative for District 125, and the Honorable Jose Menendez, Texas State Senator for District 26. Thank you so much for being here. Your leadership has an impact and makes a difference. I'm also grateful and delighted to welcome Texas Tribune Editor-in-Chief Matthew Watkins, who's going to be moderating the panel today. Matthew, thank you for your hard work in advancing the Tribune's mission of nonpartisan public interest journalism. Speaking of the nonpartisanship, we did extend invitations to our Republican colleagues, but while they were unfortunately not available for this particular date and time, I am personally looking forward to engaging and appreciating the work done by both sides of the aisle, all of our lawmakers, and the work done in 2025. Please keep an eye out for future opportunities that we will be looking forward to hosting for additional dialogue. At St. Mary's, we are committed to fostering respectful conversations on key issues that matter most to all of us. And it is only through this kind of dialogue that we can work towards the common good on our campus, in our city, and across our state. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. We are proud to host you, and we look forward to the conversations. Good afternoon.
Just got a couple other things here, Matthew. That's all right. We'll get right to the program here in just a second. I do want to take a brief moment to thank all those around the state who make the journalism of the Tribune, including events like this, possible by becoming Texas Tribune members. To learn more and to become a member, you can visit texastribune.org/support. And just a reminder, our tour around the state hosting conversations like this with communities to recap not only the 2025 legislative session, but its impact on Texans and Texas communities continues next Tuesday, June 24th in San Angelo, and later in July in Houston. You can learn more at texastribune.org/events. I'll just briefly introduce our two lawmakers today. State Representative Lopez was elected to the 86th Texas Legislature in 2019 to serve House District 125, which encompasses much of San Antonio's culturally diverse west and northwest sides and includes St. Mary's University, where we are right now. During the 89th legislature, he served as vice chair for the Public Safety and Veterans Affairs Committee and served on the Homeland Security and Land and Resource Management Committees. State Senator Menendez has served Senate District 26 since 2015, having previously served as state representative beginning in 2000. During the 89th legislature, he served on the Administration, Business and Commerce, Education K through 16, and Veterans Affairs Committees. We are deeply grateful for both lawmakers for joining us for this conversation. And with that, I turn the program over to Matthew.
Okay, thank you, Matt, and thank you to St. Mary's for hosting us and for that friendly introduction. And thank you to both of y'all for being here. Congratulations, you made it through another legislative session. You did it. So there's a lot to talk about today about what happened in the last 5.5 months or so, and a lot of different topics that will impact the lives of people in this district, in these districts, in this city, in this state as a whole. I want to start with education because that has in many ways been the dominant political issue in state politics for the last few years. And it was a major session for public education in this state. Of course, the school voucher education savings account bill passed. The legislature devoted $1 billion to that. There was new laws related to hanging the 10 Commandments on classroom walls, whether or not schools can teach DEI initiatives, and of course a major cash infusion into the school districts, $8.5 billion, much of which went to teacher raises and other expenses too. Representative, I'm going to start with you, and I think we can get into some of the details of those policies and ideas, but first I want to ask you just your sort of big picture takeaway. Are Texas schools coming away better off or worse off this legislative session, given all that happened this time around?
Well, the issue of better off or worse off, really the answer is yes. We're better off in one sense, in that there's more money being applied to the educational system that's incredibly important to our vitality in Texas. And I would say Texas, as Texas goes, the nation goes. On the other side, I've never been an elected official that did not take this into consideration during every budget process, and that's never spend money, recurring dollars, and supplant them with non-recurring dollars. And that's what we've done in the education system. We've taken surplus dollars that we've had them for quite some time, and we put them into a very needed investment in education. The problem is that it's taking existing dollars that are one-time dollars going into a budget that's going to require recurring investment. So the real question is the good and the bad. What are we doing in 4 years, in 6 years, and in 10 years when there perhaps will be no surplus? and we still have a significant investment, and we're still in a catch-up mode. So the answer is, we did some good, but I don't know that it is, and it certainly isn't sustainable at the pace that it is today. We're going to have to find other methods and come up with formulas that will allow us to make those investments long term. I'm sure as the day the event progresses, we'll get a chance to talk about some of those things that have been introduced that I think would make a good inroad into that notion, that concept.
Senator, when we talk about the money that was put into the school system, the proponents and I would say skeptics, I don't know if there were necessarily any opponents of that bill per se. The proponents, though, would say this is the biggest one-time increase in school funding in the history of this state. Some of the skeptics would say, yes, but that money doesn't even keep up with inflation that we've seen in that the school districts have been having to deal with over the last 5 or 6 years or so. How do you view what happened in that regard for the schools?
Well, it's true, sadly, that 2 years ago, the session before this one that just ended, we did nothing with the money. The money for the schools was held hostage by the governor in exchange for the vouchers, right? So now there was an $8.5 billion injection of general revenue, but that, we should have been investing at least 2 of that, if not 3 or more, last session. So our school districts have been behind. And then what you do with this bill, if you had to name the bill, give it a theme, HB2, it's the We Don't Trust Superintendents bill. Because what it does is instead of giving it to them to put into the basic allotment and let all the weights that have been allocated over the years of public school finance, whether they have higher proportions of English as a second language or English learners, if they have higher numbers of special ed, whatever the issues are that make it more expensive to run a school, that's now been controlled by all of these different buckets. Out of the $8.6 billion, $4.6 billion is going to compensation for teachers exclusively. $500 million because they wanted to make sure that many of us as Democrats would be more supportive of this, is going to teach employees below the teacher, not administrators. And that's the one thing too. There's no funding in here for administrators because what had happened in the past, they were frustrated, leadership's frustrated that we'd give them a large sum of money. The leadership would hold 5, 6 or more months in their reserve account and not fully fund the budget and then say the legislature didn't give us enough money. So that's what's happened. These are their words. They've said to me, so now we're going to force them when we give them this money, they have to use this money this way. And so you've got a record number, $834 million for special ed, almost $200 million for teacher preparation, almost $500 million for early learning, $150 million for CTE, and then there's an allotment that goes just for all the other things that they need to have, insurance and all the basic needs, to make sure that they cover the things that need to be paid.
These goals, though, that you lay out here, teacher raises in particular, right? I spoke with a teacher last week who said, this will represent, some teachers will be getting raises of $5,000, others $2,500, saying this will represent the biggest raise they have ever received in their careers as legislators. You talk about, some of the teacher preparation stuff, addressing what had been talked about in the education world as a real problem of a lot of teachers coming in sort of unprepared for the classroom and everything like that. Does it make a difference, really? Is this not what the schools should be spending the money on?
Absolutely. But I think to some extent, too, as a state, we cannot micromanage everything. At the moment we start telling everyone, whether it's school districts, counties, cities, how to run them entirely, universities, which it feels as if many in the legislature want to do, then we're not leaving any autonomy for places in this large state with 30 plus million people that we're vastly different from the Panhandle down to the Valley. We're completely different. We could be easily multiple states. We're micromanaging it to one size fits all. And it's coming from a legislature that, because of gerrymandering, is much more conservative than the actual rest of the state. The state, if you look at a Supreme Court justice race that's statewide, but it's a few below actually known names, they vote almost 50-50. It's like 51-49, 52-48. That means the state as a whole is much more balanced than the actual legislature.
Representative, going back to the issue of school vouchers, this was something that Democrats fought hard against last session. The math was pretty clear going into the session how this was going to turn out. We now have an education savings account program in the state. It will have, well, we will have one once it goes into effect in a couple of years. We will, there's $1 billion behind it. I'm curious what you think this will mean for the people in your district. Do you see families in your district taking advantage of this option?
I'm sure some will. It would be interesting, I think, in a couple of years to try to figure out, of the current population that are attending private schools today, what is the demographic change once we start putting $1 billion into that fund? Is it a different group of students that are showing up, or is it the same students with a different level of subsidy? I would argue that it would be the same students with a different level of subsidy, because I suspect that in most cases, the cost to go to a private school is much more than the amount of that is being given by the state. So the parent is going to have to make up the difference. As an example, if you want to go to Cornerstone, for example, my understanding is the basic tuition at Cornerstone is $28,000. Then you tack on all the other things that you got to do to stay in Cornerstone. It could go up to $35,000, $40,000 a year. Well, the kids that are going there today, those parents are already affording that, and they're going to see this as an advantage. Hey, listen, I'm getting a $10,000 discount. So that means that there will be no new children being able to take advantage of that going into this scenario with Cornerstone, because they can't afford the $18,000 delta. It's really, really simple. And at what point then are we also going to review what do the tuition rates modify to within this private school sector? Is that $28,000 now going to be 32, 36, 38, where the $10,000 that we're adding to that student tuition really gets absorbed in paying for private school administrative expenditures? There are no checks and balances within the funding structure that's there today. That is at the core of the problem, the argument that we've made all along. There are no checks and balances. Take the money, go do something good with it. And the answer is they'll go do something with it. And it's going to be good certainly for their students, but it's difficult to be able to validate how we're helping our community. At the end of the day, our Constitution says that we are to take care of the general population, the general students. That's not addressing, those dollars will not be addressing that population. And I'm very skeptical on how it's going to be validated when there are no indexes. There's no way of measuring its impact. What I do know is that currently Texas ranks about, I believe, 43rd, 42nd perhaps in per pupil funding. If you want to measure it there, we're not making a dent into that position. We're going to stay at that level of 42, 43, 42nd to 43rd in the entire country as far as per pupil funding. If we're going to increase it, that's where we need to increase it. But I wouldn't say just blanket write a check. It has to be accountable. It has to be driven towards something. And if we get a chance in a little while, I'd like to talk about a program that I introduced that I couldn't even get it into committee, much less have a debate on it. And that's having a universal pre-K across the entire state to make darn sure that our 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds are beginning to learn how to read and making a big difference within our education structure in the future. That's making an investment in the future. And I'm hoping that we can continue having that discussion at the state level and make some progress on it.
Senator, you know this, but for the people in the room, right, the way this voucher will work is you will get a certain, segment of funding that would have presumably gone to your school if your student was enrolled there. That will average out probably around $10,000 in that ballpark range for students. There's $1 billion in the fund to support this, and if you do the math, 10,000 divided by $1 billion. I'm not going to do that at the top of my head, but I do know that it is
100,000.
There you go. Thank you. Thank you. Good job.
You're welcome.
This is why I'm in journalism and not in engineering. But this this is there are more than 100,000 private school students right now.
No, yeah, it's much more than that, but I don't think there's 100. I'm not sure there are 100,000 seats.
Right.
Yeah, but there's 5.5 million kids in our public schools today.
But I think one of the big questions out there is, will demand for these ESAs quickly outpace the supply that they have? And if so, what is the state going to do about that?
So the thing that you haven't touched on is that the bill also allows for homeschoolers, which doesn't make a difference if they're not going to be in a private school by definition. Also, it allows for people with disabilities, special needs, and they're eligible up to $30,000 per student. And so, it's almost impossible to know which child's going to win this lottery ticket. And the sad part is that even if you win the lotto ticket to the voucher for your private school, however you want to do it, it doesn't guarantee no private school has to take you. So you can have it, you can have the money to make up the difference, and you can show up and name your private school, and they can say, "I'm sorry, Johnny just doesn't cut it. It's not up to our standards." Or they don't even have to give you an explanation. I mean, they just can say no. And so this is not necessarily school choice for parents. It's school choice for private schools. It will be a choice if you want to subsidize your homeschoolers and subsidize special needs kids, yeah. But people need to realize too, if you go to a private school, we talked about, would they be required to have an ARD like a public school? No. Would they be required to have an individualized education plan like a public school? No. So they don't have the same protections for their special needs child as you currently do in your public school. Those protections are all gone. And so, it's one of those things you have to be careful what you wish for. I think to me, this plan seems like it was a political primary check box to be checked off. They checked off a box. The governor had been wanting for years to get vouchers passed. It's a national plan. This is a part of a nationwide playbook that you see being applied in red states. And so it's done, and I think we'll look back. Fortunately, we put there was some stop gaps in terms of, because these plans have grown in other states where they have not put cost limiters to 7. They've ballooned in cost, and fortunately we put a stop gap on that.
Representative, this of course was the dominant issue of the last legislative session. Democrats in your chamber, alongside some rural Republicans, managed to block it from passing. That also, as you already mentioned, led to the blockage of a significant infusion into schools during that legislative session, schools that really struggled in the past 2 years. Many of the Republicans who voted against it lost in the primary, and it came back in the different equation. I wonder is there any second thoughts about that strategy last session? I mean, would schools not have been better off had vouchers just passed in 2023?
Hindsight's pretty good, isn't it? I think the considerations could have been different had we known that this was going to be ultimately what was going to happen. But at the end of the day, we were making decisions based on what the community was telling us. I can tell you, I specifically, and I'm sure the senator did the same thing, was reach out specifically to the leadership within the school districts, within our communities, to find out what was it that they needed to have, was what was being offered meeting those needs, and did they support it? And unilaterally across my district for sure, and generally across the entire state, they were all saying, the public school superintendents were saying, this will not work. If you will stand with us, we will stand with you, and let's make sure that we can get a better deal. Assuming that cooler heads would prevail, assuming that fairness would kind of balance out the scale. Ultimately, it didn't. What wound up balancing the scale was a big pile of money, getting rid of a lot of individuals that were willing to have a reasonable dialogue around school funding and public school funding that got booted out. What replaced them, well-intended individuals that I'm sure at every one of their meetings was talking about how important education was, how important communicating with their local community, and how they were going to listen to all of that was at the top of their discussion list. But what wound up happening when they got on the floor with I don't know if it was the largest class of freshmen, but a very large class of freshmen, primarily Republicans, what they wound up doing was showing up with a playlist, with a scorecard that said, I must vote this way or I will not get reelected. And guess what? I got elected by virtue of following the scorecard. I'm going to continue to follow that scorecard. And the people that author that scorecard are saying no to public education and no across the board to virtually anything that talked about making sure that we let the community have a say in what was happening and then give them the autonomy to execute on it. That was not the playbook that they were being measured by. That was not the scorecard that they're now going back and saying, look what I did. If it would have been, we would have listened to bills that talked about lowering the age from 21 to 18 for guns. What do? We did it in reverse. Now, if you're 18 years old and your dad happens to give you a pistol, you can put it in your backpack and take it to school and show it off to your friends, and it's not against the law. You can do that. Those are the kind of bills that we were listening to because the people that were making those decisions were not necessarily individuals that were thinking like the parent that they, ran on perspective of being. They were running off of a scorecard that said, you better vote for this stuff. There were votes that were taken on that floor that I was dismayed at virtually by the individuals that were making those. How in the world could you, under any circumstance, vote for that? And the answer is because they didn't read the bill, because we were told how we were going to vote. And there's a lot of examples of that. But forgive me if I didn't get direct to the answer. Ask me again, and I'll give you another answer. And I'll try to make it match. I'll try to make my answer match the question.
I thought it was you answered the question. Yeah.
But it's not an emotional thing to me.
Yeah, sure.
Can you tell?
Senator, I had a conversation with a Republican last week who made the case to me. There is all this attention, the media, other folks want to focus on some of these, social issues, other measures that we passed. But the real story of this legislation, he said, was the major investment that the legislature made into the future of this state. And so they point at, we already mentioned the $8.5 billion for schools, but also water, right? $2.5 billion directly added. If voters approve in November a constitutional amendment, I think there's a pretty good bet that they will. There will be another $1 billion allocated each year for 20 years. So you're talking about in total about $22.5 billion. You're looking at me like maybe my math's wrong again, but you tell me if I am. The power grid, $5 billion added to the state energy fund with an effort to increase the capacity on the grid. There were a lot of measures related to green energy that tried to target and harm green energy. Most of those, if not all of them, failed in that regard. These are major things that are important to the future of this state, the future prosperity of this state, and the state took major action on that. That should be the story. I wonder whether you agree with that assessment.
For sakes of politics, it's easier to oversimplify things. I was thinking about what you said, the scorecard. We had the same problem. We'd have a bill come out of committee unanimously, it'd get to the Senate and have maybe 1 or 2 no votes. Then the scorecard would rate your bill, and all of a sudden you had 9 votes against your bill. I had a simple bill to help homeless kids get a birth certificate so they could get a driver's license. We couldn't get a vote for it. It came out unanimously. Anyway, scorecard, for those of you who are wondering what I'm talking about, is there are some very conservative groups who have put together a scorecard that scores how legislators score, whether they're really conservative or not, and that's what they fear more in their primaries. And vouchers was dead up until the moment that Abbott the whole Republican caucus in a room with no cameras in the building, the only room that doesn't have cameras or mics in the Ag Center, and they got Trump on the phone, and Trump said that if you don't do this, that I'm going to primary you guys. And then he went on to endorse on the phone Speaker Burrows and everybody else who was going to vote. There were people reportedly that were present witnesses that saw representatives come out of there crying, saying, I don't want to vote for this, but I'm going to. I have to, because they felt that their career depended on it. Our communities don't want vouchers because they know that vouchers is not the right way to invest public education money. Let's stop and now answer your question. We made some good investments, starting investments. The problem for water statewide is so big that the investment we made, it's like a down payment on a vehicle that is not going to pay the car off, but you have to keep making big payments in order to pay the car off. It is a small down payment. Sounds like a lot. It's a lot, because anytime you use the word billions, but you got to understand this state is so big and the need is so great. And the fact of the matter is that we're just barely starting to address the issue. So water needs, that's going to be what's going to cause Texas in some ways not to be able to continue this growth that it's had, because we're running out of water. And so that's one issue. Another issue is, and you've got leadership of CPS Energy in the room. So for those of you who don't know, CPS Energy provides electricity not just to our city, our county, to this region. It's the major provider. It's a municipally owned utility. It's the largest municipally owned utility in the nation and the best run. And so their CEO is right here, Rudy. And I wouldn't have said that, Rudy, even if you weren't here, I would have said the same thing. But they have a diverse portfolio of generation. What does that mean? That means that they can, on any given day, draw energy from a diverse set of generation capacity, whether it's natural gas, whether it's solar, whether it's wind. They have this, and many of their customers are willing to pay more for renewable energy-based power. They have that capacity. We have some of the lowest rates in the nation here in the city of San Antonio. And the other advantage that they do, when Toyota was looking to relocate to San Antonio many years ago, the state didn't have the financial tools to compete with the states that wanted Toyota to go. But what did we have? We had Alamo colleges that could provide free training. And then what else did we have? CPS Energy that could give them a lower cost of energy. So we had things that we owned as a community that could make us competitive. And that's the only reason we were able to get Toyota. It's 4,000 initial jobs and the many thousands of jobs that have come since. Here's a concern. If we don't continue to add more electrons of any sort, whether they be nuclear, whether they be solar, whether they be wind, whether they be natural gas, we will not be able to connect. Currently, CPS Energy has got people trying to say, we want to come to San Antonio, we want to bring jobs in this, and they're saying, I'm not sure that ERCOT's going to let you hook up. That's an issue. And it's not their fault. It's ERCOT, because as a state, we have not done enough. And so, the fact that many colleagues, that once again, we're talking about this national playbook in terms of campaigning against things. It's a national playbook to campaign against renewable energy. Because if it's not drilled by some, energy company, they don't like it. And it's stupid. It's stupid because, yes, we know that wind is not going to be there when the wind's not blowing. In the sun, the solar's not going to be there. But that's why we have battery power. And currently, I know there's a company called GridStore that's looking to bring to San Antonio. They've got a project in Edinburgh. GridStore is a large capacity battery storage company. They're based out of Austin, if I'm not mistaken, and they're looking to do developments around the state. This would be the thing that we need to gap the 2 or 3 hours of major demand. When the demand is greatest? When everybody gets home from work around 5 or 6, and it's 6 o'clock, you got home to a hot house, you turn up the AC, and it's going to be hot till 8 or 9 o'clock at night. That demand goes through the roof, the sun starts coming down, and that's when we used to get in a pinch on energy. And what do we need? What would cover that? A 2 to 4 hour battery. That's what would cover that. That's still cheap, reliable, on-demand power. but it's not coming out of the ground, and it's not some big donor giving you money for it. And so that's part of why they came after it. Fortunately, many of us who believe in renewable energy and clean energy, we were able to somehow beat back the efforts. I mean, the House did a lot of the heavy lifting. We did as much as we could in the Senate, but that's part of where we are. I think the author of the water plan bill, Senator Perry, would have liked to have had more money, but this is one of those sessions where even after we've spent $20 billion, you want to know where we're going to get the money. We spent $20 billion on the border. We had $6 billion in the original budget. We cut it down to $3.5 billion in order to make up for the new money for the HB2, for the funding. We still have $3.5 billion there that we can use for other purposes, water or other purposes. We should not, the state of Texas and taxpayers should not be funding the border operations. We should not have a whole new Operation Lone Star separate workforce so that the governor can go out and give away to sheriffs and set up jobs and do things on the border. The border people aren't voting for Republicans because they are now all of a sudden in disagreement with our policies. They're voting because the governor is out there providing jobs and giving them things, and they see that he's helping the border region where no one else had. So he's spending all of the rest of our tax dollars down on the border, and he's getting benefits politically from it.
One thing that was striking to me was that we reported about this yesterday. One thing that did sort of silently happen in this year's budget was no more money for border wall construction. What do you think happened there, Representative? I was a little bit surprised to see that decision was made.
I'm not sure what exactly happened. Hopefully, the emergence of a conscience might be, responsible. But the reality of it is, we put a lot of money into the border, and what we're not putting into it is effort and smart investment in processes. I don't think there's anybody in this room, and I've never spoken to anybody that defended bringing illegal criminals across the border to live in our communities. Nobody wants that. Across the board, no one at all thinks that that's a smart idea. As a matter of fact, they would all scream and holler and say, you got to do something to not let that happen. And so whenever I got into a position to have that level of discussion, and by the way, that discussion was typically with chambers of commerce. It was typically with organizations like the construction folks, the lodging industry, the restaurant industry. You got to figure out a way so that we can bring legal individuals across the border, give them jobs, let them pay taxes, and then at a point in time that their visas or their permission is expired, we send them back or we force them to apply again. And oh, by the way, that should only be individuals that are coming to do a job, one, that we have a need for that skill, and B, we can't get a Texan to go do it. So I submitted a bill that actually made it to the floor. I got it out of committee with bipartisan support. Unfortunately, it died there. And basically what the bill said was asking the governor, giving direction to the governor to work with the Texas Workforce Commission to identify the jobs that were needed where there was a shortfall, then work with ICE and the federal government to create a program that we could take to the Mexican government and have them send us those individuals for a period of time. We've done that before. I don't know how successful it was, but we've done that before. And that would allow individuals to come forward across the border in a legal sense. And I think in the course of the last few days, we've heard that phenomenon has become just exacerbated by virtue of all of the federal work that's been done on immigration, the roundups and the things of that nature. That would have allowed us to bring legal individuals to come northbound, get jobs, stay as long as they are allowed to stay, and then send them back whenever they're done. As a matter of fact, when I was making the layout on the floor, a friend of mine, a Democrat who will remain nameless because I don't want to embarrass him in any way, but he went to the back mic to help me, right? I mean, that's kind of what colleagues do. You go to the front mic to deliver your bill, somebody goes to the back mic to hope to try to give you some suggestions that might be considered to make your bill more palatable to everyone. And he went basically to the back mic and said, would you consider opening this up not only to those individuals that are identified by Texas Workforce Commission and the governor's office, but to individuals that are here illegally, that they've nothing other than breaking the law and being here illegally, they've been good legal citizens, and offer them a pathway to citizenship. And my response on the floor was absolutely not. That's not what this bill is for. If you would have been listening to my layout, this is not a path to migration bill. This is not a path to citizenship bill. This is a bill to help local businesses develop our economy and be able to put the workforce that we need in place to get the work done, to move our economy forward. If we do anything different, I can assure you, for every vote that I pick up, I'll lose too. And so let's be practical about this. Let's put together a program that will allow us to work closely with the federal government and the Mexican government to bring us individuals that we want into this country and help them help us create a good economy. I didn't get it off the floor. The vast majority of the people that were on the floor listening to my layout and to the folks at the back mic saying it was a good idea weren't paying attention, because they had made their mind up that their scorecard says this is an immigration bill, you're going to vote no, end of story, don't listen to it. That's the kind of problem that we're having. We're getting stagnated by this influence by these scorecards and individuals that are relatively new to the process that don't know any better. The Republicans that I had supporting the bill were all tenured senior Republicans that were trying to carry the day, trying to see the realistic impact of what the bill would have done. Unfortunately, I just couldn't get enough of them. But we've got to continue to do that kind of discussion and make sure that we identify those individuals that are willing to listen. And the way to do that is not when I'm on the floor at the front mic laying out my bill. It's when it's in committee, when you can go out there and stand at the mic and tell them your story. You need to go and advocate. They will listen to you much more than they'll listen to me on the floor. As a matter of fact, I would argue they'll never listen to me on the floor, because by the time they get to the floor, they've made up their mind on how they're going to vote.
All right, I want to remind folks that if you're in the audience or watching online, if you have a question, you can raise your hand and submit it. Looks like we have one up here in the front, or you can submit it at texastribune.org/ask. We will get to those in just a minute. I want to talk politics very briefly here. There has been some reporting in recent days, and folks saying this publicly in Congress about the idea of the Trump administration putting strong pressure on Governor Abbott to call a special session for a rare midterm redistricting of the congressional seats. The idea being Republicans need a little bit more of a buffer to maintain their majority in Congress, and that there might be some space in Texas to do this. Senator, what are you hearing about this? Do you think this is a realistic possibility that such a session would be called?
This rumor has been going around since we were in session. I believe that the administration is looking forward to building its advantage in states where it feels that it controls all the levers and can actually get more gerrymandering done. The irony of it is that the only way to do that is by reducing the Republican population in some existing districts. And that irony would mean that it would put those current Republicans at risk of losing their seats in a general. I welcome, if I were able to draft the script, well, first and foremost, I think it's a dumb idea. I don't know why any Democrat would show up to a special session where that's what you would do. What incentive on God's green earth do I have to go help increase gerrymandering? But anyway, but if somehow I were in charge and I could write the script, I would write districts that would not be packed with either Republicans or Democrats. I would make them all competitive. And the reason I would do that is because then at that point, if you make competitive districts, now everyone running for Congress has to go talk to all the voters in November. The problem that we have, with all due respect to my dear friend, and we've got a long-standing history of agreeing, and we carry each other's bills, and I think he does great work. It's not in committee when we lose these bills. It's after the election. It's because the people that get sent up there only worry about the primary. They don't worry about the general election. They don't care. So if they have nothing to lose, then what's the point? They don't care. And so if the redistricting is ridiculous. And also, but look at the tea leaves. I mean, read your Twitter account. The current county judge of Laredo today announced that he's opening a exploratory committee to run against Cuellar. What a coincidence. Yes, we're talking about redistricting and this and that. So it doesn't surprise me. I think I would hope that where Democrats can influence whether or not that bill could even be heard, that we would do that, because I don't think we should be a part of that. I think that's just abuse of government, abuse of power.
You sort of touched on what my follow-up question was going to be, is like, would Democrats even show up to a session like that, or would they prevent it from happening?
Well, I've been known to leave before.
I have heard that.
When the issue is a BS issue, when democracy is at stake, you cannot put a penalty on me that will keep me from exercising my voice. And that means, if it means walking away, not showing up, and going up, but it's not to not show up and stay at home and watch TV and watch what's going on CNN or MSNBC. It's going ahead and getting active, going and talking to the leadership in our country to make sure that they understand. And I alluded to, I've been known to walk away before. So it was 57 other Democrats that left a couple of sessions ago, and we went to Washington, D.C., but we didn't go over there just to get out of the state so that we wouldn't have to go to the office, and so that we wouldn't be forced to vote. We went over there and we started knocking on doors every single day, talking about what was at risk, what was happening in Texas, and it became not a Texas issue, but a nationwide issue. There are now states across this great nation that are recognizing the things that were happening in Texas was a prelude to how government was going to be monopolized by the Republican Party. So we accomplished our objective. Yeah, we came back, and ultimately, we had to take the vote that we ultimately had to take. We didn't have the votes to kill it, so you could say we lost. But it isn't so much in the total win and loss of the issue. It was, did we make it a national issue? Has the discussion been there? And I would argue that it not only has it been a national issue, the whole issue of democracy, it has been at the forefront of everything that has happened in the course of the last 6 years. So that's what's important, to making sure that, we don't show up, but that we stay somewhere and be very, very loud. We need to be very loud, like what was happening in the course of the last weekend or last couple of weekends. Within reason, let our voices be heard. Within reason, have a statement to be made. And ultimately, somebody's going to have a conscience, and hopefully it'll be some of those elected officials that'll have a rebirth of their conscience, I would hope.
One less political question for you, Representative, before we go to audience questions, which is, this session started out with a very contentious speaker's race, a race in which Dustin Burrows was the victor, in part because of the support he received from Democrats in that race. Representative Burrows, Speaker Burrows, went on to be a very conservative speaker. He was in many ways aligned with the lieutenant governor in ways that maybe more so than recent speakers have been in that way. I'm curious, how do you and your colleagues feel about the speaker and the job he did now that the session is up?
Well, I'm going to try to be nice, as nice as I possibly can, and first say that we got a lot of good things done, during this session. A large percentage of what we do is nonpartisan. A lot of what happened that most people don't hear about are things that got killed, things that were stopped before they made it to the floor. Not all of them, but there were a significant number of things that were modified by the time they hit the floor, that were because the speaker agreed with us that we had to have some level of say from a minority perspective on what that legislation was going to be. So from that perspective, we won some small battles, and those battles looked more like things that we killed that were inside of the bills. Reducing certain language that would not be quite as bad as it would have been had it been. They had the votes to pass just about anything they wanted. We knew that. As I used as an example earlier, I sit on Homeland Security and Public Safety. And I was told, and as vice chairman of that committee, I had the authority and the budget and the rule-making capacity to be able to call a bill that was sitting in committee to be heard. Well, the problem was I'm not the chairman. The chairman was the one that ultimately decided what got onto that agenda or not. So we decided that one day we were going to listen to all of the gun bills in one big meeting, one long meeting, and we knew we were going to be there till late at night. And so I thought we're going to bring all the gun bills forward. Well, we had a gun bill that was going to ask to lower the age from 21 to 18 for assault rifles. That bill didn't make it to the floor that day. The one that did make it was lowering handguns from 21 to 18. That one did make it. And the problem is that, yeah, we were given some latitude, but it wasn't latitude that would completely violate the scorecard. They were still looking at that damn scorecard and saying, I cannot change the laws around age for guns. I just got to stay away from that. But we're going to listen to all the other debate. And it was unfortunate. So at the end of the meeting, I asked what happened to the bill that I asked to be brought forward. He said, well, there were so many that we can't get it done in one night, so we're going to have another run at guns probably in the next week or two. That never came. And those of you that have worked in Austin know that it's much easier to kill a bill than it is to pass a bill. And it's easier to kill one by virtue of time. And that's what happened to a lot of really, really good bills. But that's not to say that there weren't some limitations that were put out there. There were a lot of DEI issues that were discussed that we were able to take some of the edge off of. There were a lot of LGBTQ rights issues that were women's issues. There were a lot of issues that we were able to take some of the edge off, but it still passed. And it's because at the end of the day, if you're a Republican and you're needing to make a decision based on a particular issue, you're going to lean into your party's direction if you want to get reelected. And if you don't believe that that's the case, talk to Dustin Burrows, talk to Dave Thielen, talk to Bonin, talk to all the individuals that pushed back on the lieutenant governor's agenda and find out where they sit today. They'll change the leadership until they get somebody that'll jump when the string gets pulled. We had a lot of good things done, but a lot of bad things also happened, and that we're still around to try to fight those. And I know that you're going to go to public questions in a minute, but you kind of started off with a comment that basically said, I'm sure it was jokingly, that now that it's over, we've been there for 5 months, and you're relieved the work is kind of finished. And the answer is the work is just starting. For the next 18 months, we're going to be talking about what's going to happen in the interim, what attention we're going to put on what topics, and make sure that the speaker allows those topics to be made top of mind so that we can debate them and be prepared to pass meaningful legislation next session to be able to, take our positions and move them forward. So the work is just beginning. I know that the senator does the same thing. We're looking right now to submit letters to ask for particular topics to be put on into committee during the special session so we can continue having this dialogue. It's got to happen. So,
Thank you. Matt, let's do a couple audience questions.
Great. We won't be able to get to all of them in our time here, but appreciate the questions and we'll share them with both lawmakers afterwards. Want to get into a couple issues here. Rachel from San Antonio asks, regarding Texas water infrastructure, many groups supported the legislation because the funding for needed projects depends on assistance. Yet once the funds are available, it could be used for wasteful projects that are not sustainable, such as piping water around Texas. What is a better way forward to not run out of water for basic needs, including environmental flows?
I'll start. In my opinion, the cheapest form of water and the best form of water, the most environmentally friendly form of water is conservation. And so we should be doing anything and everything to conserve as much water as we can. We should also be trying to teach best practices. Look, San Antonio has a history of using similar, if not almost the same per capita amounts of water as it has 20, 30, 40 years ago because of conservation. But we've got to make sure that the rest of the state is doing that. It would be, in my opinion, unconscionable for someone to be watering a golf course with potable water. They should be using recycled water. We should find more ways to use recycled water. So that's where you start, in my opinion. And right after that, right below it, is fixing the leaks. There are leaks all around this state where good potable drinking water is going through the pipes and out, and we're losing that. I think that needs to be addressed. I think these are you take the low-hanging fruit on what's the easiest way to keep the water you have, and then and only then do you start looking at possible desal of brackish water that's on site. I think obviously transporting water is expensive, so I think you take care of how do you get water closest to the demand. I think this is the way I would go about it. And I've actually posed those questions to the chair of the committee, Senator Perry, to say, how can we make sure that when we look at these projects, these are projects that are viable, and they're not just viable, but they're cost effective, and they're the most environmentally friendly as well.
Barbara, I appreciate some questions that are from Texans wanting to just get some clarity on impact of legislation. Barbara from San Antonio asks, is it true that once a child receives a voucher, it will renew so long as the child is eligible, and that child's siblings have an advantage for getting vouchers? Does that mean certain families who have superior eligibility for their kids?
I honestly don't know the answer to that. I don't think you'll find very many elected officials who'll ever admit to that because it's so unclear. We suspect that that's the case, but it is quite unclear. I mean, I think at the end of the day, the only fair thing to do under an unfair scenario like we have today is for every voucher that gets approved needs to go through a process, and that child needs to be validated and certified, that child has an absolute need to get public dollars to go get an education at that particular institution. But I can tell you that the rules don't set it up that way. So, I just really don't know the answer because it's unclear. I know what the intent is. I know what I would prefer, but there's no methodology, there's no language that defines it.
I think there were some parameters in terms of who would get preferential treatment. I think there was some to low income, and then there was a tranche left for anybody that earned any amount of money that we tried to cap. We also tried to create a way to make it to where all foster kids of Texas could get it. If you really think this is a good idea, why not let them? And since the state of Texas is their ward, we're guardians for those kids. I have to agree. The thing is, the comptroller is going to put this into place, and so I think we're getting a new comptroller here pretty soon.
And our last question actually was submitted before Representative. You talked about kind of lawmakers and scorecards and appealing to scorecards. But Ray from San Antonio states, it seems to me that lawmakers on both sides are often controlled by scorecards rather than guided by principle. What would you recommend as the best way to render those scorecards irrelevant?
Elect Democrats. And I say that, and we all kind of giggle over that, but there's a big difference in the parties. The Republican Party is structured in a way where the scorecard is what's being driven. In the primary, during the Republican primary, they vote on a lot of issues that ultimately become part of that scorecard. They have nothing to do with what I would want to have happen, but it was voted for during the Republican primary, and therefore it becomes part of their platform. And that's what drives a lot of that. On the Democrat side, we don't do it that way. I mean, it is literally the big tent. It's a lot of discussion about a lot of different things and a lot of variation of those different issues. The only thing that we can do to modify that is to make sure that our voices get heard. Unfortunately, I just don't see very many of us being able to make a whole lot of ground going to a Republican convention and try to raise some of the issues that we're trying to raise that are good for the public in general. So
let me take a little stab,
yeah,
because I think the impression by a lot of voters are that because the districts are so gerrymandered, that even for us, there's got to be some group that holds us accountable. I think that's what they're thinking, and I think that you're looking at two guys. Ray was a school board member. It doesn't get any more tough than being a school board member, a trustee for Northside Independent School District. Then he went to city council like I served at city council. And then, he was in the House, I was in the House. When you work at a local level and you work with your constituents, you're not beholden to groups. I ran it against an incumbent with no money and won by 41 votes. They don't control you because you know who you're afraid of it's the person answering that door when we're asking them to vote for us. So there's no NRA that controls me. There's no special group of any that says if I get a D and F and whatever from any special interest group, I don't really care. Why? Because you see that second table over there. All of y'all stand up on the team. Stand up. The staff right there. Those are the hardest working people in the Capitol and at home. That team of people represent me and work for us and work for you both at our district office in Wonderland Mall, in the Capitol. And let me tell you, I'll end with this, and I want to thank President Hervés, not only for hosting us, but President Dr. Hervés, but for staying the whole time. I've been very impressed. I want to thank you. So people, voters, sometimes may not remember exactly how you voted or what you said on a particular issue, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And so if you prove to people that you care about the issues that matter to them, and then you back that up with your actions, with the bills that you introduce, with the votes that you take, with the actions like when it's not easy to take off and leave your family at home and go to D.C. and be there stuck, going into meetings with people who don't want to see you, that's not easy to do. And on Mother's Day, we took off for Ardmore, Oklahoma in 2003 because of the first time that they wanted to do that sort of thing. And I had to tell my wife, I didn't even know where I was going. But we left Mother's Day, cut it short to leave the state for 4 days. Not like these guys. They left a lot longer. But my point is that sometimes you have to do what you have to do. And then now we have what happened in Minnesota, where people are on the extremes, are getting so angry with their legislators for standing up for their constituents that they're going to their homes to shoot them. It's crazy. And what happens is, the sad part is this, folks, fewer and fewer people are going to want to put their families through this. I'm sure you've had to answer to your grandkids, and I've had to answer to my kids. How long do you really have to do this? Can you get a bulletproof vest? Are you carrying? Things, is there someone there? I mean, these are the realities that we're dealing with, and it's not right. It's wrong. And it's wrong that we've allowed this to happen. And the sad part is, in the last mayoral election, only 17% of our population voted. The problem is that we want better, but we're not participating. Now, I'm sure everyone in this room votes every election and everything, but y'all know people who don't. We all do. And we got to get up and we got to explain to them why it's so important that we all vote.
Okay, and I think that is a great place to end it because we have gone to the end of our time. But thank you both so much for being here. This was a great conversation, and thank you so much to St. Mary's for hosting us. We'll be back again sometime soon.